Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Whole Village Eco Village, and thank you so much for having me here. My name's Leanne Wallis. I'm an ecologist. I'm also a long-term supporter of Whole Village. I've been coming here for the occasional work day for probably around 10 years, I would say, right, Brenda?
Yeah.
And I once worked for Credit Valley Conservation, and I had an opportunity to do the biological inventory here at Whole Village. With your permission. So at that time I was able to walk the whole property, make notes of the different forests and wetland communities that you have, and the plants that you have here, the animals that you have here. It's an absolutely lovely property. I now live an hour away, but I still try to come up here as often as you'll have me. And I'm just so happy to be here today with you and to explore and see what we find.
All right. That's great. So what are we looking at? Can we get down there safely?
So Brenda was mentioning that there was some question at one point about what the green stuff is down in this swamp, and whether it could be algae related to agricultural field runoff or whatnot. But it sounds like from looking at it, someone had looked at it in the past and it was duckweed. So we can certainly go down and take a look. Flower.
Yes, the mud's about 6-8 inches thick over
I'll bring it up.
Okay.
Brenda, we got some plants.
I wanted to ask you what the yellow flowers are.
They brought a couple of them up here.
Yeah, we can go over that too.
What's that?
Is that the duckweed?
So we have a few different things here. You're right, Brenda, we do have some duckweed. So there's 3 or 4 different types of duckweed in Ontario. This big one that we're seeing here, see if I can pick out some.
Oh, there we go.
There's a piece there. So that's called lesser duckweed. So you can see it's sort of like, almost like a piece of clover almost in shape, like it's got the 3.
It's much nicer up
sort of
close than when
lobes.
you see a green pond.
And this is a floating plant, which is why it's appearing almost like an algae crust on top of the water. And at the bottom, we have, it's really hard to see, but there's these small little rootlets.
Oh, yes.
Small little white rootlets coming out.
Tiny, very tiny.
Now, we might have, we have another type of duckweed, which is a more rare type. So you have the lesser duckweed, that's a pretty common one. All right, but we also have, this is really cool. See this dark green one? Just gonna try to spread this out, see if we can get a good one here. This is called star duckweed. See this dark green one?
Right.
And it sort of has
Wow.
a cross shape. So notice the color difference, right? That one's dark green, but we also have this really light green one here. See the light green one? That's lesser duckweed. This is star duckweed. Now, because we're in the Credit River watershed means all the land that drains into a certain point, so all the land that drains into the Credit River. Credit Valley Conservation will GPS things that are regionally rare in the watershed. So, just for your own curiosity, star duckweed is something we would GPS because it's rare. Okay, so that's really cool. It doesn't have any special legal protection, and it's not provincially rare, but it's regionally rare. It's interesting enough that we would say, wow, that's cool, let's make a note of where this was, so we can remember, right? But there's something else really cool in here, and I need someone small to help me notice something different. So we noticed this one here, right? That's the lesser duckweed. Remember that one? And the dark one, do you remember that one? Star duckweed, right? But look at all these dots. Do you see all these small light green dots that are all through here? They're even smaller. Do you guys see what I'm talking about? All these small little granules. You see that?
Oh, it's like eggs.
Yeah, they look like eggs or little baby duckweeds, but they're neither. See what I'm looking at? That's a different type of plant. You see that, Joel?
Yeah.
And then bring that over for Nancy to see here. Do you see all those little green granules? That's a different type of plant. That is called watermeal. Watermeal. And it's the smallest vascular plant that we have in Canada.
Wow.
So it actually creates flowers.
Oh, wow.
And they're, as you can imagine, minuscule. Like, I have never seen one. If I have not realized I've seen them because they're so small. So super, super small plant, and very overlooked. So when people are going out to do biological inventories, they'll often see the really nice lesser duckweed because it's really prominent and it's easy to see. But they'll often miss the star duckweed, and they'll almost certainly miss the watermeal because they're not looking, right? So we don't have tons of records of that. We don't really know how common it is or how rare it is. But anytime I see the lesser duckweed, I always look for the other ones because they always like to hang out together, right? So that's what we have there, and I'll take this sample back. But before, Ben had found a really cool plant, and Brenda had expressed interest in knowing what this is. It is.
Yeah.
Is that pretty?
Yeah. So what is
Isn't
this?
that pretty?
The bees are on
Yeah,
it.
it is like a mini sunflower.
And the bees like it.
And I would say it's probably in the same family. This is a group, it has a really funny name. It's called beggar ticks. And it's a nodding beggar ticks. See how the flowers are nodding? Sort of like a sunflower will when it's really heavy with seeds. There's a few different species, maybe 5, 6, 7 in this area. But this is the nodding one, nodding beggar ticks. And it likes to hang out in wetlands around water, which is exactly where you found it.
Yeah, I haven't noticed it before this year.
Yeah,
It's come down the watershed maybe.
very, very pretty.
Nancy?
Ella,
Ella campaign.
And look, you got a flower over here.
Got it.
What are they looking for?
Yeah, I don't want that one though.
So I can,
That's 2 years old.
But she said to do the
What's
first year
special about
ones.
this?
These are the ones we want.
Good medicinal.
What are they?
Ella campaign. It's a
We need we need to come back with a shovel
immune system
later.
booster.
Now that we know where it is. That's
are you
perfect.
prepared to speak to the medicinal aspect of this?
No,
It's
they're
a
good
very
going for
it's called an immune tonic, but it's really, if you were feeling like you were getting sick, it's much stronger than much
Elderberry.
more effective than echinacea or anything like that. It's really a good one.
What is it? Sorry?
Ella campaign
And what parts of it do you use?
the root
the root.
of the first year ones. And they're
So the one with the flower and the big stalk is 2 years old and doesn't have a lot of the energy's gone into making the flower. So the root of this one, I'll come back and dig that later. Or part of it anyway.
has a flower stalk.
For us to have, because it's an immune tonic.
So when we started today's hike, Carrie had said if we see any Ella campaign, point it out. Because she had recently, was it just this morning, been on a herbalist walk, and you learned about Ella campaign, and here it is on your property.
Excellent.
So Carrie is the expert, and I can pass
This
on
morning's
what she
expert.
has just explained to me, that Ella campaign is a biennial. And so the first year, it just puts up these basil leaves, which are right here.
There's 2 of them.
And then the second
plants.
year, it puts up its flowering stalk. There's some other biennial species that you may know. Burdock is one of them. Same thing, puts out those big basil leaves the first year. The second year, it puts up the stalk with all the burrs. Wild carrot, Queen Anne place is the same thing. Puts it up in the second year. So what I've just learned from Carrie is that this is an immune tonic. So if you're starting to feel like you have a cold, starting to feel like you have a flu, that you can. Now, how would you process
So
that as a
take the
tincture,
root.
maybe?
Take the root,
Okay.
not the leaves, clean it. It'll be filled with lots of dirt. Chop it up with, you could use Tulsi, holy basil as well, to help for a cough or for immune system. And put in with some honey, apple cider vinegar, and if you want to keep it shelf stable, some at least 40% proof alcohol like vodka. If you're using what's the 100%?
Green
It's
alcohol.
green alcohol doesn't have enough water in it, so that's too strong.
You can use it, but you just realize you got to dilute
You have to
it, or
dilute
it'll
it.
kill you.
Yeah,
So
you
that's
have
how
to
you
dilute
preserve it?
Yeah, so that's how you preserve it.
But it also helps you get more out of it. And alcohol is really important to extract.
Solvent.
So it takes
It's a solvent, yeah.
some of the properties of it will be utilized through water, the water pulling it out, and with just water, you're missing out on the components that the alcohol will pull up. And I can't speak to what those are.
Right. So you do a shot of it.
Yeah, do a shot of it, do a teaspoon of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You feel like something's coming on, and if you're sick, then 3 or 4 times a day, and to only use it for 3 or 4 days. And then
We have a whole bunch of blackberries here too. I think we're a little bit late in
bit
the
of a
season
drop.
for berries.
But I can see elderberries over there above.
where are you looking?
Straight ahead in the sun, it's lit up as light
Oh,
green
yes.
colors.
So feel free to come closer through the blackberry jungle. Now, who was it that spotted this elderberry?
Joel.
Joel with the eagle eyes.
We're getting him trained.
So we harvested a couple of other trees of elderberry last week.
Were they
And
wild or
closed up.
were they in the garden?
One's in the garden for sure. I don't know where the other one was.
So last time I was here, I mentioned to Nancy I was interested in getting some elderberry for my garden. And then we walked by your garden, and there was a whole bunch of elderberry already in your garden.
Yep.
So maybe Brenda, had you been the one that planted that elderberry?
Yeah, I planted
Yeah?
lots of them, and the birds actually plant them
Huh.
by pooping out the seed, and then I move them where I want them.
Well, there you go. So this is a wild-grown one, and there's a couple that we can find in the wild. This is black elderberry. This is the one that people like to use for wine, for blackberry syrup. I think on pancakes and whatnot. I'm not sure how you would use it, Brenda, because you are using it for something. The ones in your
Mary
garden.
just made some.
I made some syrup for cough and cold.
Okay,
Made a batch for everybody.
there you go.
And did you get enough? You were going to make wine?
I didn't get enough to make wine, but I made like
more.
a cranberry sauce with them.
Cool.
Nice.
Just mixed them with grapes.
Nice.
And I think
Nice.
Brenda makes jelly as well.
Oh wow! So
Well,
lots.
yeah, we just do the concentrate and then add it to juice and sap, jazz it up for the winter.
So lots of different uses for elderberry, whether it's a garden species or whether it's wild. Now, there's 2 different types, like I mentioned, that grow in the wild, the black one and the red one. This is the black. The black one likes to grow in wetlands. The reason I know that it's black, obviously darker berries, but it has a flat-topped inflorescence. See that? It's flat, right? Whereas the other one is red, and you'll find the red one growing in forests and upland areas, and the red is like a cone. So think like a staghorn sumac type cone, so it's elongated. This one is flat. I have been told you can't eat the red, but I've also been told that people will,
Oh,
and that people do. But this is the one that's supposed to be tasty, and I don't see this very often, and I'd love to get some of this for my garden at one point. See if I can find some more of that. But we also have this thing that looks sort of like a poison ivy, but is not. This is, the scientific name is Rubus pubescens, which I think is called dwarf raspberry or dewberry. And it has a small little red berry, which I believe is also edible, and it's a wetland species. This is Rubus pubescens, I think it's dwarf red raspberry.
Okay.
And this is the wild strawberry. You see it's got little hairs on the stem, unlike the other one. So lots of nice fruits to eat here in the woods. So you've all heard of leaves of 3, let it be. We have a bunch of leaves of 3 here, and you do not need to let them be. Alright, so we have a bunch of different things. We have that dwarf red raspberry that we were just talking about, right? That's a leaf of 3. Do you want to be my helper here?
I'll be your helper.
Okay. We also have the strawberry, which is also a leaf of 3, right? This is a new one. Does anybody recognize this? Okay, this is a jack-in-the-pulpit leaf.
oh, right on.
Right, looks very similar to a trillium, but it's a bit different.
I would never know it without the flower.
Also a leaf of 3. Here I'm cheating a bit. This is a regular red raspberry, so a wild red raspberry. But if you didn't have those 2 leaves, it would be a leaf of 3, right? And then we have this creeping vine that's all over everything. Who knows what that is?
Is it Virginia creeper?
Close. Yeah, just has 3 leaves.
Oh yeah.
The Virginia creeper is this one here that has the spiraling, the 5. This is clematis. Some of you gardeners might know clematis.
A wild one.
That's a wild one. Clematis virginiana. So ferns. I know a lot of you are interested in ferns. You mentioned you had a frost here.
Several.
Yeah.
Several frosts.
Yeah.
This is called sensitive fern because it's sensitive to frost. It's the first one that will disappear because of the cold.
It's protected in here.
Yeah, sensitive fern and very distinct. There's not really anything else that's going to look like that. So if you see that, you'll know it. That's a nice easy one. And here's its reproductive structure over here, right? Bracken with a B. Yeah. So flat topped, and it's divided into 3 parts. 3 main stems. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So you have some type of unknown mushroom, and it's eating this log, right? It's eating the log, and it's turning it into soil,
When
isn't
I
it?
realized it, I'm stepped and right at the edge of my toe.
Goodness.
I'm like, what? There's mushrooms on this log.
White berries. This is white baneberry. There's another one that's called red baneberry, which has really, really thin stalks, like wiry. But yeah, baneberry. What's left of it? This is a spring flowering plant.
It's lasted that long.
Oh wow! Oh, good find.
You're standing on some actually.
Oh, sorry.
That was
I might as well pick it up now that it's.
So, Jasmine has found a nice trove of amanita mushrooms.
Oh yeah, aren't they beautiful? Sorry.
So anyone who wants to see the mushrooms, we have them over here.
They're so pretty.
So these are in the amanita group, which are considered poisonous. So we're not going to touch these. Yeah, we're not going to touch these ones because they're considered poisonous. But this is called yellow fly agaric. It's a pretty common one. So you're going to see like basically white sort of specks on top. And that's because when they first come out, they come out sort of like an egg, right? And then as they come up, they expand. And the white parts are part of that veil that covers it when it's coming out of the ground. So this is black knot fungus. Only grows on cherry species. And in these woods, we have black cherry, like, and you would be able to tell me
Cornflake bark. She taught me this already.
cornflake bark, burnt cornflake bark. So that's a black cherry. And then
Cornflakes.
this one here is a choke cherry. This is an understory tree. And they both get this black knot.
And is that a fungus or is that a critter?
It's a fungus, yep.
A lot when
Oh,
the kids were little.
Brenda's got something there.
Sure.
Oh, our
That's
favorite.
Mary's plant.
Mary's plant. Did you want to speak about Mary?
And the nightshade.
Yes, this is bittersweet nightshade. Those of you who are gardeners that believe the leaves sort of look like a potato. Do they? Maybe a little?
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of, maybe a little.
Hold it still.
Poisonous. Don't eat it. Looks pretty, but don't eat it.
Because it's called?
Deadly nightshade or bittersweet nightshade. So it's related to tomatoes and potatoes. And it's a vine, so it's just sort of creeping all over the vegetation. You'll find it in wetland areas, but also in upland areas. And Brenda had been talking about the meadowsweet, and this is the meadowsweet over here. Just right, literally in front of you, Jen.
And those
here.
berries don't belong to it, do they?
They do not. That's our bittersweet nightshade. So these would have had the white flowers earlier in the year. They don't exist anymore. That's also a wetland shrub, and we only find it in more northern type areas around here. So you're probably not going to find it down in Mississauga or Brampton unless it's planted, but you will find it native up here. Yeah, that's a willow. That's a Beb's willow. Yeah, it's a shrub willow. It's Beb's. I can grab a leaf. I'll show you. The leaves are really cool. So stay here. I'll be right back. So, when you're a botanist, there's groups of plants that are very hard to identify, and willows are one of them. Willows are very, very hard. Grasses, as a group, are very hard. Sedges are very, very hard. So this is a shrub willow, and it's called Beb's willow. B-E-B-B, Beb's willow. And it's one of the easiest shrub willows to identify, so it's a really good beginner one. And I'll pass this around, but you're going to notice extremely wrinkly leaves. Extremely wrinkly leaves. Almost a little bit of a fuzz on the bottom. And nothing else is going to be that wrinkle-leaved. So I'll give that to Zelda first, and if you want to pass it around so people can look at the Beb's willow.
I'm also curious, I know you said they're very difficult, but what types of grasses are
Yeah, so this grass is called reed canary grass.
It is canary.
When you are around botanists will often use scientific names for things. And when I first got into this work, I did a co-op with the MNR out of Peterborough. And one of the guys was trying to explain to me the name of a plant, but he only knew it by the scientific name. And he kept trying to say, what's the common name? What's the common name? What's the common name? And I was like, oh my gosh, he's so smart because he doesn't even know the common name. He just talks in scientific names, right? I thought, wow, he's so brilliant. But what happens is you when you do this for work, people will just say the scientific name instead of the common name for some species. So if you saw me hesitate there, it's because I wanted to say this was phalaris. Because that's what, I'll refer to it to people as a phalaris. But that's the scientific name, Phalaris arundinacea, right? But the common name is reed canary grass.
And what is that down here?
Reed canary grass, it's this tan-colored grass that's all around you with the tan-colored inflorescence. It's often very dominant in marsh habitats. So there's some grasses that you'll only see, here and there, and then there's some things that dominate. Cattail, which isn't a grass, is one thing that'll often just dominate a whole wetland, right? Phragmites, or common reed, that really tall one with the billowy, feathery top, that's another one that'll dominate a wetland. And this one, reed canary grass, will also dominate a wetland.
Yeah, if you look out on the field and you see a batch of this, that's a wet spot.
Exactly.
Right? Because it tells you what's there underneath.
Exactly. So that's a good point. If you're seeing an area from a distance, you can interpret whether it's going to be wet or dry by the species that you see. So if you see this, you're like, oh, it might be wet, right? Just a clue for when you're navigating and you're wanting to choose your route. So Jen found this plant growing on the edge of the wetland. Jen found this plant on the edge of the wetland. Does anybody know this plant?
The horsetail?
So horsetail, that's right. There's a bunch of different species of horsetail. This is the most common one. And this one is something that you can use for medicinal.
Yeah. Good for your
Who
hair.
knows what?
No, I gotta look
For
it
hair.
It's high in silica.
Yeah.
So
Hair,
it's good
skin,
for your
nails.
hair, your skin and
nails.
your nails. This is something that I,
2%,
back
I
in
don't
my herbalism interest days, that I actually did collect. And I saved it in a mason jar, and I made tea out of it. I'm told you're not supposed to have too much of it, but yeah, and I remember it as having a really, really mild flavor. It's not strong or bitter or anything like that. But yeah, that's horsetail. So it's high in silica.
So in the future, when we can't get our Brillo pad, we use that instead
Oh,
of pot.
you know what? I've heard of that too. When you're
Yeah.
camping too, that
Yeah.
you can use it. Yes,
Really?
pass that around.
Wash your pots with that.
It scrapes and scratches.
Someone was asking about ostrich fern earlier. Well, this is not. This is actually even cooler than that. Now, this This is interesting. See these little areas where they look all shriveled, like they're dying? This is actually the reproductive parts here. So the spores are on here, but they just look like little aborted leaves. How cool is that? This is called interrupted fern, because the foliage is interrupted. See? Interrupted fern. And it looks a lot like a cinnamon fern, a lot like an ostrich fern, but it's more uncommon. This is actually pretty cool. I've only seen interrupted fern a few times.
Wow, neat.
And you're not going to mistake it as long as you see,
See
those
the interrupted,
the interrupted reproductive structures there. You know it's interrupted fern.
So neat.
Yeah. If it was cinnamon fern, we would be looking for little cinnamony tufts at the base of the leaves. But interrupted cinnamon fern is not going to have this, neither is ostrich fern. So interrupted fern.
Okay, I need
Very
a reminder, because it takes me a few times. What's this fern called again?
That's right.
Sensitive.
Sensitive fern.
Sensitive?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because it's turning brown already.
Yeah,
Okay, got
exactly.
it.
Sensitive
Takes me a
fern.
few times.
No,
And
that's
interrupted
perfect.
and sensitive. Okay.
Interrupt because there's just one. Squish that in your fist, but like that, and hold it. Just squish it. Just take it off. Just break it up. It's falling apart? So the rustulas are called brittle caps because they're supposed to fall apart pretty easy.
Did it?
Mushrooms are difficult, that would be my guess, but it's a rustula.
Poison?
Not anymore.
Sort of different.
It's because this, look.
Ben and Zelda have noticed these cool fungi that are on this dead birch or aspen tree.
I know it's
And-
polypore because look.
You're right.
And look, right?
So what Zelda is pointing out is with a lot of mushrooms, when you flip them over, you have gills. But in this case, you have a whole bunch of small little round holes called pores. There's so many that it's called polypores because there's many pores.
Whoa.
But they're really hard to see unless you have really good eyesight. And the spores are inside of there. And there's sometimes this group is called bracket fungi because they grow sort of on the sides of trees. And we think this is probably an old tinder polypore, and that can be used to start fires. It's supposed to be very good at...
Is it petrified? Like charcoal?
It's just old.
That's why it's black.
No, is this edible at all? If it's new?
It is. You can... There's a birch polypore, which is antiparasitic. I'm not sure if the tinder polypore can also be used as an antiparasitic in tea to kill worms. You'd have to look that up, but it is used for starting fires. So you remember that the Iceman, the 13,000-year-old Iceman that was... Yes, he was carrying tinder polypore in his pocket.
Oh, can you pass some of that actually?
Can you pass us the big one that you threw?